Hi guys, I'm here today to do a sort of book haul, but not really. This is more of a sort of reading challenge slash reading vlog. So if you haven't seen my June reading plans video, I'll link it up here. I briefly mentioned in that video that I'd bought myself 7 books right at the end of May, just on a whim, ordered them online because I was feeling a bit low. And when they started to arrive at the start of June, I thought, what if I actually read them all this month? I know, revolutionary idea. So when I was like a child slash teenager, I used to go to the library every weekend, get 10 books out. I used to get home, I used to read the first couple of pages of each, put them in a stack of the order I wanted to read them, leave the stack beside my bed and just work my way through that stack of 10. Now, obviously when you're a child you have loads of spare time, so I'd read 10 a week. That's not going to happen. But I really miss that as a reader. You know, I love having the amount of books I do, and I know this is sort of like counterproductive because I've bought more books, which means that I have more, but whatever, let's ignore that fact. I just want to, for 1 month, retain the reading high, like the excitement I have for these books being like newly acquired and me being like into these books right now. So I'm literally just going to hold each of the books up, tell you the title, and not tell you what they're about because it seems a bit pointless, because obviously I'll repeat that once I've actually started or finished them. So as I said, I have 7 books here. I have 3 new releases. So we have Manchester Happened by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, which is a short story collection. Then we have another short story collection, although a much bigger one. This is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. And I haven't read books by either of those authors before, but I have read a book by Linda Grant. So this is A Stranger City, and this is a novel, and I previously read The Dark Circle by her. And then another author I've read a book by before is Maggie O'Farrell's. This is Maggie O'Farrell's second novel, My Lover's Lover. I'm trying to read her novels from the earliest publication to the most recent, so I've read her first book, which was After You'd Gone, really enjoyed it. This actually has the lowest ratings of all of her books, but I still want to work my way through them, so I'm excited to get to this one. And then I've heard everyone rave about this one, and I finally caved, and that's The Heart's Invisible Furies by Boyne. It's very big, it's around 700 pages, but I feel like it could be a real page turner, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I recently saw Simon talk about this one. This is Happiness by Aminata Fauna. This has recently come out in paperback and it sounds amazing. Although when it arrived, I had a little flick through, as I always do, and it's got very small font, which bothers me. I feel like they should just print it on more pages with a more readable font size, but you can't have it all. And then lastly, I have a non-fiction book, and that's Under the Rock, Stories Carved from the Land by Benjamin Myers. I'm convinced Benjamin Myers could be one of my favourite authors, and yeah, I haven't read any of his books. And I've owned one of his books for like 2 or 3 years, and this is his only non-fiction, I believe. So, and this is like a nature writing focused on the area in West Yorkshire that he's from, and it looks like it's going to be beautiful. So those are the 7 books, and what I'm going to do now is I will check in with you when I have started a book or when I have finished a book, and let you know how it's going. So what I will quickly say now before I go is that the first book I picked up is Manchester Happened, and I'm about, I think, yeah, 2/3 of the way through this, so I may finish this today on the 3rd of June. I'm not quite sure. I'm really enjoying it. It's an amazing short story collection, so I will check in with you guys once I've finished it and give you my final thoughts. But I'm really excited to have like picked it up the moment it came through the post. It felt wonderful. So there's that one. So it's now Sunday the 9th of June, and I thought I'd be checking in with you earlier than this because I assumed like one of the books would take me 3 or 4 days to read, which is, if I like make sure I actually read after work, that's how long it usually takes for me to finish like an average length book. But instead I decided to read 2 of these books alongside one another, and then I also had a non-book haul related audiobook on the go. So it's just taking me a little bit longer. So this one I'm now going to show you. I started buddy reading with Simon from Savage Reads on Monday, and we both finished it, or I think I finished it Friday and maybe Simon finished it Saturday morning, and that is A Stranger City by Linda Grant. So I finished this at like 11 o'clock Friday evening, and it was one of those books, when I finished it I was a bit like not sure how I feel about it, so I wanted some time to sort of consider that, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it even though it's, you know, more than 24 hours later. So yeah, so basically I didn't hear anyone talk about this. I just knew that Linda Grant had a new book coming out, and I previously read her book The Dark Circle a couple of years ago because it was long listed for the Women's Prize, and I quite enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her writing style. So when I heard she had a contemporary book coming out that sounded like it was going to be somewhat of a crime drama, I was intrigued, and so I decided to treat myself to it. And unsure, the first half I was in love. This was easily a 5-star read. Her writing style is phenomenal, incredibly detailed. The just descriptions of characters and the rooms they move through is glorious. Like, if you like really descriptive, atmospheric, sensual writing, she does that perfectly. The thing I had an issue with, and I think Simon and I both found it a little bit, we were unsure about it, and even right now I can't say in all honesty like how I feel about this book overall. I think I'm gonna need a few more days, and I might even like flick through the last 60 pages a bit more just to like let those thoughts settle, because this book is pretty lacking in plot. So if you like plot in books, then this isn't for you. You start out with sort of 3 main characters, and you get the feeling that you're going to follow those 3 main characters with a focus on this unnamed woman's body who was found in the Thames, and these 3 characters are somehow linked to this woman, and through them you're going to find out who this woman really was. And actually you're introduced to those 3 characters, but then you move away from them and you meet loads more people, some who are their relatives, some who are completely random people that they bump into, and you end up having lots of secondary characters and lots of like tertiary characters. There's just loads of different, tertiary is for the third, isn't it? And you end up having loads of different characters. And initially I was enjoying that, but I think towards like the last third, when I felt like we should start wrapping up and pulling together some of the characters we already had, some of their stories, instead we just kept moving with more and more characters. And yeah, I don't know, I felt slightly disappointed by this, and I even felt that because I was annoyed when I was reading the last 60 pages at where she'd gone with it, I wasn't enjoying the writing style as much. So unsure. And also I will say there's a couple of moments in this where she says things that just make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So she made a comment about, she had one character describing some other characters who she believed to be Jewish, and she gave a description of what they looked like, and one of the things she said was about them having like big hooters or something like that. I was instantly like, right, that's made me feel uncomfortable, and I understand that we're supposed to believe that this character, she's a much older lady, perhaps she you know, has some sort of prejudice, and that's the way she views things. But then I double checked and saw that Linda Grant has Jewish heritage, so I was a bit like, I felt a bit more at ease with it. But then later on in the novel she mentions like someone's nose again, and I just found it a bit uncomfortable. And there was another bit where this was a completely like character who's like sort of irrelevant to the story. So one of our sort of tertiary characters mentions that his sister has a Downs daughter, and that's literally the way the sentence is structured, that she's really busy because she has a Downs daughter. And I really don't like that terminology, and when I come across lines like that in a book, I'm just left thinking, is that the way the author would talk, or is she just trying to make you think that's the way the character talks? And so it pulls me out of believing that this is real, because I'm then analysing the author's motives, and I'm then very aware that it's a novel. So maybe that's just me, but those couple of points irk me a little bit. So overall, I think her writing can be glorious, but I think she got a little bit lost in the idea of London and did a few too many weird things and just did too much in one novel that didn't in the end amount to as much as it could have done if she'd have done a bit less. Does that make sense? So I'm going to read more Linda Grant because, as I said, her writing style can be beautiful. But yeah, I always think that I would rather read half a book and feel like it's like 3 stars and I'm enjoying it, and then think that the last chunk is phenomenal, than the reverse. Because I think when you read the first half and you're like, this is amazing, and then it stops being amazing, then you're only left feeling disappointed because the last moments of that book weren't amazing, and it's harder to remember the first bits. So yeah, I feel like I've rambled for a while about that one. Apologies. I had no real plan as to how I was going to do this, whether these were going to be like actual reviews or whether I was going to save that till the end of the month. It appears I've just actually reviewed this one, so there you go. This is probably going to be a long video. So the next one, I started this short story collection, Manchester Happened, by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, on the Saturday the 1st of June, and I thought I would probably have it finished by Wednesday, and then just sort of midweek I fell out of the habit of reading them as much, so I actually finished the last story last night. So I picked this up because I saw Simon review it. I'd sort of heard about it, but it wasn't one that I was intending to pick up until I heard a bit more, and then I saw Simon do a review in a recent wrap-up and it just sounded amazing, so I thought I'm going to treat myself to that one, and I did. So this is a short story collection about so the first half is focused on Ugandans from a city called Kampala who have moved to Manchester, England, and they're all in Manchester, and some of them want to stay and some of them are thinking about the fact that they don't want to be in Manchester anymore and they actually want to go back to Uganda. And then the second half of the book is about people who are in Uganda who have been to Manchester, and it's about how they try and sort of assimilate back into their culture, now being viewed as like other, now being viewed as like English Ugandans, and how that feels. So in both chunks of this book, in both sets of short stories, we follow people who never feel completely at ease with their nationality. And I think that must be the case for any person who's one nationality and lives in another country and also then goes back to their own country after years of living abroad. So as a commentary on any two countries, I think that's interesting. But I think having the pairing of Uganda and England was particularly interesting because they're such different cultures, and I think she highlighted that brilliantly in this book. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. So some of these stories I loved, and sadly, and I hate when this happens, the first short story was my favourite. And the reason I don't like when that happens is because it sets you up for such a high, and the whole rest of the collection you're constantly thinking, I hope one reaches the heights of the first one. And none of them did for me, but I will say the first short story is amazing. It follows a young boy who is living in Manchester with his family, and there's some stuff going on with his parents, which I don't really want to spoil because you find out more as you go on, but he's desperate to leave Manchester because he thinks that lots of his family's misfortunes are because they're in England, and he thinks that his family, his parents, would be better people if they were still in Uganda and living the traditional Ugandan life. And I think, to be honest, that sort of just shows who I am as a reader, because if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know I love stories from children's perspectives, and it was the only story in here from a child's perspective, so maybe that was why I loved it as much as I did. And yeah, there's quite a few other stories I really enjoyed in here. There's one that's set at an airport in Manchester, and we have a character who has lived in the UK for a while, who's from Uganda obviously, and she works at the airport, and it's sort of a commentary on what it's like working at an airport as a black British person, how she's treated differently, but also, and most interestingly, how the other people she works with, the white people, view her when she has to do like baggage check on other people of colour, and the tension that causes. And I thought that was really interesting. There's quite a lot of stories in here that are quite funny. There's other stories where it's really highlighted the difference between Ugandans and British people, just in terms of tradition and beliefs, particularly to do with marriage and sort of things like having second families and sort of hidden secrets and things like that I found really interesting. So yeah, I enjoyed this collection. I think I'd recommend it, and I will be interested in seeing what else she does. I haven't read Kintu, which is her novel, so I think I will now. But I think I preferred the stories set in Manchester, which were the first half, than I did the stories set in Uganda, and I think that's because as a reader, I find it fascinating reading about people's perception of the UK when they're not from the UK, because it highlights the bizarre things we do. Whereas the flip reverse is the people going back to Uganda from Manchester and sort of in some ways being embarrassed or ashamed of parts of their own culture. And I guess I feel more comfortable being embarrassed or ashamed of my own culture than someone else's, although I guess, yeah, they're both enlightening in different ways. So that is Manchester Happened. You know, both of these, I don't really know what my ratings are. I'd say I'm sitting at like 3.5 stars. You know, this could have been 5 stars, but the second half just really let it down for me. But I feel like it would be unfair to say 3 when there were some bits that were phenomenal. And this one, some of the stories were amazing. And overall, I think it shows that she can really write, but short story collections are really hard to give high ratings. You know, if there's a few stories that you just find a bit forgettable, which I did. I mean, you know, even thinking about saying that, like, I do remember a lot of them. But yeah, you know, I've given Amazing Short Story Collections 4 stars, so I don't think this is quite there. So those are the first two, and I am unsure what to pick up next. Part of me wants to reach for one of the other books on the stack, and then another part of me last night when I went to bed was thinking maybe I just feel like a quick middle grade or a fantasy, something that's, I feel like I've just read a book set in London, and I've just read a book that, you know, 50% was set in Manchester, which is obviously another large city in England, and a couple of the other books I have are also set in London, and I feel like maybe I should have a gap before I go on to another London book. So I may just read like a fantasy or something rural maybe. I might look for my shelves for something rural, I'm not sure. But we're about to go out for lunch because it was Johnny's granddad's 81st birthday yesterday, and I'm gate crashing because it's just his grandparents and him and his two sisters. But I love his grandparents and I haven't seen them in a while, so I'm rocking up as the only, you know, non-blood relation. I don't think they'll mind. So yeah, that is the plan for today, and then we will probably, depending on the weather, which looks really nice at the moment, we may go, there's a place called the Plantation Gardens in Norwich, which is a secret sunken, I think it was a Victorian garden, and I think, God, I could be really wrong here, I'll find if there's a website and link it below. It was lost, because it's a sunken garden, I think it was because of bombing. Oh, I could be so wrong right now. Something happened and the garden was lost and people didn't know it was there. It grew over with brambles and things like that, and it was hidden, and then years and years later, probably due to development, they found this hidden, you know, sunken Victorian garden. So you walk in and you go down all these little steps and you suddenly look round and you're just surrounded by all these slopes of like tiered gardens. It's beautiful. So we may take his grandparents there as well, and then I need to come back and do some filming. So yeah, that's the plan. So I probably will not pick a book until then, and then maybe if it is one of the book hauled books, I will check in with you later and let you know that I've picked it up. So yeah, see you in a bit. Hey guys, so it's now Sunday, I think the 14th of June. There's been a little bit of a gap since I last caught up with you. What happened is I picked up the third book from my book haul, and that is The Heart's Invisible Furies by Boyne. I heard just everyone rave about this one, had like ridiculously high ratings on Goodreads, particularly for like this type of book. I think generally like fantasy and young adult books get really high ratings, but like adult books that are like non-genre fiction don't tend to. And recently I heard Lauren and Simon both like really rave about this one, and I sort of got in my head that he might be similar in writing style to Maggie O'Farrell and Anne Patchett. So both those authors, I think, are really good at sort of family dramas and quite slow paced, but really sort of, I don't know how to describe them. They just capture people and atmosphere and like descriptions of rooms and landscapes just beautifully. And so I was hoping Boyne would be that sort of author who deals with a serious family drama, but you just want to keep turning the pages because it's so like easy to read yet like effortless. So that is what I was hoping for. I read the first part, which if you have read this book or haven't read this book, you may or may not know. The first part is when this young lady in Ireland is denounced in her Catholic church because she is pregnant out of wedlock and she's quite young, and so she's told to leave and she travels to Dublin. And then the structure of this novel is that we skip forward 7 years for like 7 different chunks, and each 7 years we're following that child that she had. So the first segment is him being born, and then the next segment is when he's 7. First segment I thought was just okay. I didn't think there was anything special about the writing style, but, you know, I was sort of interested to see where it was going, but I was a bit, I guess, felt a bit lacklustre about it, but I was like, you know, I'm not very far in a really long book, so I'm willing to give it more of a chance. And then I got to the second section, which is him when he's 7 and he's living with these adoptive parents, and I got to page, I think, about 90. And I was just getting really pissed off, and I just thought, why put myself through it? Like, I could give it more of a chance and try and have 100 pages, but I just know it's like, it's one of those situations where it's like, it's just not the book for me. Like, obviously loads of people love it. I felt that it was a lot of tell and not show. There was one quote in particular where the author says something along the lines of, this situation was akin to having a tattoo branded across the buttocks. I mean, I hate the word buttocks anyway. and then like I think that's like enough for you to understand what he's trying to say, but then the sentence goes on to be like, you know, to be filled with shame and loathing for your whole life. And I'm like, yeah, I get that that's what you're trying to say, like a tattoo across the arse, like I get it. And I just felt like that was quite a lot. And then basically in the second half, humour started to come into it, and like quite extreme characters that aren't necessarily like super believable. Like he has a bedroom in this house of this adoptive couple he lives in with, and they don't really seem to care for him that much. You don't really know why they adopted him. And then there's a scene where the sort of adoptive mother comes upstairs and she's like, oh, this is where you hang about. And it's like, come on, like he's 7 years old, he's lived with you for 7 years, of course you know where he lives. Like I get that you're supposed to be eccentric, but like I just find things like that, like over the top eccentric humorous characters, they're not for me. And it felt like that was going to be the tone of the novel, so I started to read lots of reviews, and particularly I always do this when I'm unsure about a book. I read lower ratings and see if people are saying that they dislike the same things I disliked, and see if they say that is throughout the novel. And that was the case. People who hadn't enjoyed the book were saying didn't like the humour, it was just over the top, and it was a lot of sort of tell not show throughout the novel. So yeah, bit of a shame, because I was feeling like it could be another author who, like literary fiction author who'd like I'd speed through, but not for me, and that's okay. And it means that I'm not going to waste time on the 700-page book because I've given up on it. So yeah, and I've not really been reading this week. There's been lots of drama going on because we're thinking of moving house. We were planning to buy our first house in a few months' time, and I've seen a couple of houses this week that have tempted me and sort of sped the process up. So I'm not going to go into detail because I'm fed up of even thinking about it at this point. I just feel like I feel like I've got constant like upset stomach because of like anxiety of like worrying whether I'm doing the wrong thing or not. So yeah, so I've not really read because all I've been doing is just looking up house stuff online constantly for the last week. So I'm trying to give myself a chilled Sunday afternoon, just trying to stop thinking about house stuff, and I'm going to pick up another book, and maybe I'll check in with you soon if I have picked up another one of the newly hauled books. Hey guys, it's a whole week later, and yeah, I just checked the last clip and I was wearing this then as well. It's really comfortable, and it's also been warm on both Sundays, and it's like one of the best things to wear when it's hot, so that's my excuse. I have had my hair cut since then though, so slight difference. Anyway, so this week I have read another couple of books that are not involved in this like new book haul, but I have just finished this one, which is My Lover's Lover by Maggie O'Farrell. Now, I picked this one up because I read Maggie O'Farrell's memoir, which I know so many people did. It's called I Am. I really enjoyed her writing style, so I decided to go all the way back to the start of her books and read from her first novel up to her most recent. So I read her first novel, which is called After You'd Gone, early this year? I think it was this year, and really enjoyed it. Sorry, Johnny's doing the dinner through there. We're having fishless fingers, waffles and beans, school dinner time, love it. So yeah, and he's just run out of the tap for ages. Don't know what he's doing. So yeah, so then this is her second book. So I knew this had the lowest ratings out of all of her books, but I want to read them in order, and I feel like she's an author I have enough confidence in terms of her writing style, that even if she does a not so great book, it's still going to be good. So I felt confident still picking this one up, and I still enjoyed it. I completely get why this hasn't got great reviews, because there are lots of problems with it, but ultimately I still felt like I got some enjoyment out of it. And particularly the last 100 pages, I just sat and sped through just now on the sofa and, you know, enjoyed getting lost in the story. So the premise of this is that the novel starts with our sort of protagonist, Lily, meeting this guy at a party, and he is just like, I need a flatmate, do you want to move in? And she's like, why not, as you are. And when she gets there, she realises that the room she's going to be living in is still filled with another woman's things. And when she asks him about this other woman, he almost words it as if to say this woman has passed away, she's gone on, or, you know, something. He says something along those lines. And Lily starts to feel the presence of this woman. It's sort of like a haunting. And we follow the story as it unravels from there. That's as much as I'm going to say about the plot, because I feel like there's some twisty stuff that I didn't have any idea about going in, and I wouldn't want that to be spoiled for anyone else. 1 second, my arm's very sore, I'm gonna have to move it. That's better. So I didn't even need to hold the camera up, I was holding it that whole time, and actually it can hold itself. So anyway, what I felt about this book initially was that I happened to be listening to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier on audiobook. It's one of my favourite books of all time, but I'd never reread it, so I've been loving that experience. And the first section of this is very reminiscent of Rebecca. You might have already had alarm bells going off when I was describing the premise of this book. But not only is the initial plot fairly similar, there's also like quite direct nods to Rebecca, which are more noticeable when you're reading Rebecca at the same time. So there's points where the smell of this woman is referenced as being in the air, and she smells like a certain flower. There's points where like her dresses are referenced, and like those are really big themes in Rebecca. So I was a bit unsure as to whether it was a bad call to be reading them both at the same time, because obviously Rebecca is so phenomenal, anything's going to pale in comparison. But then it actually became sort of its own story and it moved away from those themes a little bit. So overall, I'd say this is like a 3-star read. Maggie O'Farrell can still write really well. Her descriptions of people's emotions are really good. However, the main character of Lily literally has no personality. I agree with everybody who says in their sort of low star rating reviews that it makes no sense as to why she goes and stays with this guy unless she finds out more why she keeps sticking around. There seems to be no chemistry between them. He just comes across as a dickhead, so that's a little bit annoying. I guess quite similar to the character in Rebecca. She's incredibly passive. She's on a shaker. And also there was a couple of points. I really enjoy Maggie O'Farrell's writing style, but this is early in her writing. And I didn't really feel this with her first novel. There was a couple of points where I felt her writing like just edged a little bit on the like cheese or the too sweet. Like, I don't even know how to put it, just felt a little bit too heavy-handed. Like, she mentioned at one point that he had cold, hard, icy eyes or something, and I can't even remember how it was worded exactly, but it just felt a little bit lame and cliche. So yeah, characters are a bit weak, some points of the writing a little bit cringe, but in general I still enjoyed it. I still think as a writer she can pretty much write any novel and I'd enjoy it, and it's made me really excited to get to her third novel. Not sure what one it is yet, but I will go away and look into it and maybe pick it up in the next couple of months. So yeah, I feel really conflicted because I guess I've read 3 books so far from the book haul, and I have DNF'd 1, got 3 more to go, and this was the only one, let me just think about the other 3. Yeah, this is the only one that was, no it wasn't, Linda Grant. I'd read Linda Grant before. So yeah, because all the others I haven't read any books by those authors either. So yeah, at the moment it's not going phenomenally well, I guess, because I've DNF'd 1, and I say that all the other 3 are sitting at 3.5 stars, which isn't great. Like, this one isn't even at 3.5. I'd say, like, it's odd, isn't it? I find star rating sometimes a bit pointless. I said this before, because in a way, the Dark Circle, not the Dark Circle, I keep wanting to call it that, Linda Grant's book, Stranger City, at some points it crept towards a 5-star, but because some bits of it really annoyed me, I feel like overall I'm left with more of an overall enjoyment of like Manchester Happened. And I guess because I take comfort in Maggie O'Farrell's writing style, I'm also left with more of an overall enjoyment from this. But yet if I had to choose one book of the 3 that had moments of greatness, it would be A Stranger City, although I really loved that first story, Manchester Happened, as well. So yeah, so far none of them have been 4 or 5 stars, nothing's blown my mind, but I still have hope. And the last 3 I have are a novel, a short story collection, and a non-fiction book. So they're all very different. And I now have a week to read all 3 of them, which at my current pace isn't so good. But I'm hoping to just read them all alongside one another, because that's what I tend to do with books of different types. So I will check in with you throughout the week and wish me luck that I'll finish the 3 of them, because I really would like to complete this challenge. And yeah, just see how it goes and see if I have any amazing ones, because to be fair, the other ones are a bit longer than the rest, so it could take me a bit longer than a week, but we shall see. Anyway, so I'm gonna go and have my school dinner and start a new book, and I will check in with you guys in a few days whenever I've read some more. Hey guys, it's now the Friday evening right before the end of June. I don't know how many days there are in June, so I'm not sure what date that is. 28th, I think it's the 28th. So I said in my last clip that I was going to read the last 3 books and then update you, and then I just checked and realised how long this vlog is already. So instead I'm going to edit and upload this hopefully this evening, And then I'm going to spend the rest of the weekend, which we have like a really nice chilled weekend. We've been quite busy recently and just really looking forward to getting loads of reading done. So I'm going to spend the rest of the weekend reading the last 3 books. I have already started 2 of them and I'm about a quarter of the way into both of them, and I'm really loving them. Like one of them in particular, I feel like if it carries on the way it is, it'll be one of my favourite books of the year so far. So that's good. And one of them I haven't started yet, but I'm hoping I'm going to have to read a lot this weekend to get through all 3 of them, but I've got enough time for that. So I will upload this section here, and I will hope that the next section, which will be uploaded like early next week, I hope, will be a bit more positive, and these 3 books will, like, I'll enjoy them more than the others. So yeah, not that I didn't enjoy the others, but as you know, having listened to me for ages, they weren't like 4 5-star reads. So I'll talk to you in the next vlog. I hope you enjoyed this. I love watching vlogs, whether they're like book focused or bookish people doing non-bookish things, but I film so many of my own vlogs and then I don't upload them because they're all just clips of me doing this, because I'm not super creative, so I don't really like doing all the like camera work. I have a really heavy DSLR camera, which is obviously amazing. It's a great camera, so I can't complain about it, but it's not exactly fun or easy to do like vlog like clips with. And also I'm just not massively like into filming my actual life. Like I find that a bit like, I don't know, it feels a bit, for me, I enjoy watching other people's, but it feels like it makes my life a performance, which I'm not so into. So yeah, I prefer doing these clips, but I'm aware they're probably really boring. So I hope you enjoyed it still, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.